For the standing abdominal crunch, we're going to use the optional abdominal back pad, which you can see has a slight curve to it, perfect for these exercises. It just attaches to the machine like any of the other seats or seat backs. And then, Josh, come on around front. I've got the adjustable arms or freedom arms up to position number 1, which is not all the way up at the top, and that keeps the cable and the handles a little bit away from Josh's head and neck. Now, Josh is going to bring the handles to the front, and notice how he scooted down a little bit. So his shoulders are on the pad, his bottom's still on the bottom part of the pad. And holding the handles here, for some people it's really simple. Just keep them right by the shoulders, relax your forearms and everything. For other people, you might find it easier to kind of interlock your fingers, interlace your fingers, and that'll help you take some of the stress off your upper extremity. But you just want the weight just sitting there. You're not trying to pull with your arms. The big key is to pull with your abdominals. Now watch carefully, because Josh tightens the abdominal muscles and imagines that he's pulling his ribs down towards his pelvis. You don't want to think about trying to push against the machine. Here's what happens sometimes when you do that. Show him, Josh, when you go way out there. Almost like a sit-up, where he's thinking in his head, I just got to shove against the machine, I'm fighting this machine. That's not what we want. We're not fighting the machine, we're working this. So notice the perfect motion is when he goes all the way back with his shoulders against the pad, chest up, then he starts to pull the ribs towards the pelvis, and the shoulder blades curl away from the pad just a little bit, leaving the low back against the optional pad right here. Now you can use the regular seat back for this exercise also, but I really prefer the curve to this pad to enhance the crunch. So choosing the weight, I'd like for you to choose a weight after you learn this motion, after you learn the control. Choose a weight that's really going to allow you to perform each rep perfectly, and fatigue maybe between 8 repetitions and 15 repetitions, something like that, basically what's comfortable for you. But it does need to be a little bit of a challenge. This exercise is not meant to be a 100 rep crunching exercise that most people do usually for the purpose of trying to spot reduce. And what I mean by that is they think they're going to melt the fat away from their waist by doing crunches. It's simply not true. That's not how the body works. What we want to do is do a muscle building exercise, a strengthening exercise that is going to allow these muscles to help support your spine and allow these muscles to look good when you eat right and do the rest of your calorie burning exercises to help remove the fat. But this is a strengthening exercise. Choose the weight appropriately, perform it with the appropriate control, and you'll get exactly what you need out of this. This is just a traditional tricep push down using the lat tower. Now you can perform the same exercise if you don't have the lat tower by just putting the freedom arms all the way up to the top, which would be 0, or almost to the top, which would be the first setting, number 1. But we're going to use it with the bar on the lat tower. Now, go ahead and grab, sometimes people grab very narrow on this. I'm going to recommend you grab it about shoulder width. If you grab narrow, you have a tendency to turn it into a press with the rest of your shoulder muscles, and we're really thinking with this exercise just elbow extensors or triceps. So go ahead and bring it down, Krista. And the first thing we're going to do, notice she's got her arms straight and she's got her upper arms right by her side. She's going to do her best to keep the upper arm from moving forward or backward so that the entire motion is just this little arc that you can see towards her legs, away and up from her legs. There you go. So down and towards, up and away. So she's making that nice little circle, and you can see she's working really hard to keep this still. Try to go all the way straight as close as you can. Some people find it more comfortable to actually stick their bottom out and bend forward a little bit so they get up over the bar, at the end. Does that help a little bit? Yeah. And you can almost feel your abdominals working a little bit when you do it that way. But one of the big mistakes, and we'll go ahead and show you here, is as you come up, people will let their whole arm go forward, and as they come down, they'll throw their arms, rather than straightening, they'll throw their arm backwards like this because they're just trying to move the bar and they're not really thinking about changing the position at the elbow from bend to straighten. So that's really the whole key right there. So the more control you use, the more you're going to feel and get results in the area you're looking for. So stay right here on my hands. Don't let your arms go forward. There, back to the perfect one. Straighten all the way. Good. That's it. The standing bicep curl really involves a lot more than just the biceps because your elbow is flexed by a lot of muscles beneath the bicep, brachialis, brachioradialis in your forearms. There's a lot of other guys working in there. And to tell you the truth, you're going to be using the trunk muscles to hold you upright. You're using leg muscles. You're using shoulder muscles to keep your posture. There's a lot of things happening. The main motion, though, is in fact occurring when the elbow bends, caused by these guys right here. So take a look. Josh is in the traditional curl position. You've got the ropes from the bottom pulleys, and he's using a supinated or palm forward or palm up grip. And he's keeping it that way the whole time. The big trick, watch what he does. He keeps his arm pretty stable. His upper arm, it's not moving forwards and backwards. Show them what happens, Josh. Sometimes people, as they start out, they let the elbow come backward and they swing them way forward. They do all these things. And I'll tell you what that does. It just diminishes the effectiveness of the exercise. It's a version of cheating. They're trying to find a way to move much more weight than they can really move. And there's no benefit to that. If you can't move it, lose it. So look at him staying real stable here and controlling the motion, not yanking on anything. Here are some variations, though, that make it kind of fun. He could alternate either one and then the other, or he could move them both in simultaneously alternating fashion. And I told you before how cool these grips are. One of the things he could do is easily slip his hands to a hammer grip type position. Look at that. Didn't have to really change anything else. It's just a little slip of the hand grip. And that changes the contribution of these muscles. You'll probably feel more of the forearm stuff going on when you do this, but they're still all three working on each side. So there's some nice little variations you can take a look at. You could even go one notch further and do a palm down, which is called a pronated grip. You could do that, and that gets harder. You'll probably need to reduce the resistance for not only the hammer grip, but definitely for this pronated grip. You lose some strength pretty dramatically. So I don't know that you'd want to make those changes the way Josh did here mid-set, but he's got a light resistance, and we're just trying to demonstrate. Once you choose the one you're going to perform, I would keep it that way throughout the whole exercise. Again, control's the key. Keep those upper arms in one position and you get the most out of this exercise. Go all the way to the top, all the way to the bottom. Watch right up there. See how I keep squeezing? That's important. A lot of times people get about halfway and they bail. Go all the way to the top like you're trying to fold up or close this forearm all the way into the bicep. There you go. This exercise is sometimes called a standing version of a pullover. It's very, very similar to a stiff arm pull down that you may have seen. People do like with a bar, a straight bar, and that's also in the DVD. But take a look at this. We've got the lat tower that we're utilizing for this exercise so that the resistance can come from above. If you don't have the lat tower, you could just as easily use the freedom arms, put them all the way to the top to position 0 or position number 1. You can do the exact same thing. We've got the handles up here, and I have specifically adjusted these for the D-ring closer to the handle for Krista. And the first version we're going to do is just having her standing up virtually just straight up, and then bringing her arms, keeping them pretty straight, maybe a little tiny bend in them, but bringing them straight down by her sides and maybe even past her body just a little bit as is comfortable. And something you can do to kind of augment this exercise is as she brings the arm back, she can kind of bring her shoulder blades together, and then as her arms go forward, she can let her shoulder blades go up. So she's kind of incorporating an entire upper body thing, not just the arm movement, right? Now, as with everything else, we want to keep the abdominals tight, keep the low back in a good position. We've got a pretty light weight on there, but she's doing it with ease. And if you're doing it this easily, here's something else you could try. You could change it just a little bit. I'm going to have her bend forward at the hips, stick her bottom out, go ahead and take a little more. And that's going to allow her to start in a little higher position. Now, she actually lowered her body, but that would be the same thing as raising her arm. But now she can start from this greater position of shoulder flexion without hitting the pulleys, and it gives her a greater excursion of the entire upper extremity as she comes back here towards her hips. And again, you can see the shoulder blades moving, so she can bring the shoulder blades down and back as she goes through the motion. So you're involving everything here that moves the shoulder blades, all these posterior shoulder muscles, including the lats, and even some triceps as she holds her arms steady. This is the close grip pull down, and you'll need to set up your machine with the seat and the seat back, and if you have the lat tower, we're going to use that. Notice the lat tower has the bar and the bar hooks. Don't take the bar off of the hooks until you make sure everything else is hooked up, the ropes from the lat tower and everything down, because that's going to create the tension that's going to make it safe to take this off. As far as the seat goes, there are 3 different positions or 3 different knobs here that you can put the seat on, and that basically creates 2 different positions for this middle height. There's another setting down here that's for something else we'll talk about later. But the thing is that putting this top hook on the middle of these 3 pegs allows you a gap here between the seat back and the seat. And it's really going to be nice because as Krista sits down and faces the machine, she can put her thighs underneath the seat back. And that's going to help stabilize her, especially if she starts using a lot of resistance that may tend to pull her out of the seat. So because of that, there might be upward force on the seat back, and you'll need to use the locking pin to keep the seat back on in this exercise. So Krista, let's go ahead and come around. This is reverse grip, so it's usually about a shoulder width grip. You can experiment a little bit, sometimes narrower, sometimes wider, depending on the person. And your palms are facing you as you grab hold, right? Now just go ahead and have a seat. There we go. And notice she's leaning back just a little bit, and she's going to keep her head kind of in line with her spine so she's not looking all the way up at the machine up here. And then we're just going to think about not so much pulling on the machine. That's really not the goal. The goal is to control the movements of the body. So what I'd like to see her do is move her shoulder blades down as she brings her arms and elbows down right by her side. Look at that. That's perfect. And then she reaches up with everything, shoulder blades up. So we're moving every single part of the upper extremity. Now the mistake that's most common, I think you'll see, is when people start out up here and they leave their shoulder blades up by their ears the whole time. We want to try to avoid that. And sometimes what people need to do in order to learn shoulder blade control is leave the arm straight and just do some kind of downward shrugging to develop the control, and then put all this together so it's one unified fluid motion, bringing those arms down by the sides and really squeezing everything down and back. You'll also notice that she's not worried about whether the bar touches her rib cage or not, or touches her chest. That's not important at all. In fact, different shapes of bars, different lengths of forearms, the bar might not even get close. As long as she's folded up like she is right here, that's the end of the range of motion. And anything else that she does to try to get the bar down further will simply mess up the good job that she's done so far with control and precision. So when you get this down, you start adding a little resistance. You're going to be involving all the latissimus, shoulder blade muscles, and even some elbow flexors in this exercise. But the biggest thing, as always, is control. For the chest press, you have a couple of seat height options. Now, both of them exist with the seat almost to the bottom of the machine. There are 3 pegs down there, and you need 2 of them for each setting, each height. So you've got about 3 inches of difference, either all the way down or this one, which is about 6 inches off of the floor. And we chose this one because of Josh's height and where his shoulders line up relative to the pulleys. Now I've lowered the freedom arms to a position number 7, which puts them just a little bit outside of Josh's elbow when his arms are out to the side. And that's going to keep a nice tension through the exercise all the way from start to finish. So check that out and experiment for yourself and see where you need both the setting and the freedom arm to be adjusted. So the first thing, getting in position, you're going to notice how Josh kind of curls or bends his arm to get the weight up here, and then flares his arms out to the side to the chest position, the press position. Okay? Now, notice that he keeps his shoulder blades kind of back and controlled. They move a little bit, but he's not allowing them to go forward. Let me show you what that would look like if Josh threw his shoulders forward. That's what we're trying to stay away from, because that's using a lot of other muscles besides what you're really probably hoping for with this exercise. So as he keeps those back, keeps his chest up, notice he lets his elbows go out to the side as far as he can control, lets them go back, and then drives forward into the center, kind of like he's making a triangle headed towards the middle. And it'd be real similar to a dumbbell press, only of course with Spiroflex resistance. It's a lot smoother and a lot more consistent resistance. So that's the main thing, and he's kind of keeping his arms out almost even with his shoulder, maybe a little below his shoulder, so they're not way up here and they're not way down by his side. Those are the keys right there. Watch how far back you go, control the forward motion, some cues or instructions to maybe keep in your head. Think about squeezing with the muscles in front. Perform this motion by thinking about these muscles bringing your arm towards the center rather than thinking about a push. Now sometimes people think about a push and they need to do that for a sporting activity or something where they need to get stronger at shoving. But many times if you're doing this for a true chest press, you want to concentrate on the muscular activity and thinking about the arms being brought towards the center, because that's what these guys do. That's what all these muscles across the front do. So you can think more about the together part of the motion rather than the forward part of the motion. But check them both out and see what works best for you. For the decline press, you're going to want to set the seat height on one of the two settings that's available between 15 and 18 inches or so off the ground. Have the seat back in place, and the freedom arms, we've got them set on about number 3. And that not only brings them up above Josh's shoulder, but obviously it's a little bit wide also. So the angle of attack of the cable is going to be a little different than your other presses, and that's going to feel different. So experiment with it before you put a bunch of resistance on there. Did you see how Josh did his perfect little curl in maneuver? That's really important. Gets the weight in where you want it before you put a lot of stress on the shoulder. And then he's pressing down, keeping that cable pretty much in line with the arm. Now this is very similar to the old decline, it's called a decline press because it's similar to the old, lie on a bench with your head down, pressing up with dumbbells. Exact same thing. The misconception about that exercise was that it only worked lower pecs. You can tell very plainly here that it works every part of the pec, and you can even see lots of shoulder muscle activity there. So all that stuff is working. It is kind of a pressing exercise in that we're going from a wide position towards the center. So it's not just a press forward, it's a press together, if you will. So think about those things, and finally control the motion backwards to the stretch position. Keep control of that. Make sure you don't go so far that you feel any form of impingement, pinching, or anything like that up in your shoulder. And other than that, keep control. The leg extension is a great exercise for strengthening the quads, but there's a very important part to this as far as setting yourself up, the position of your legs relative to the machine. So come down here and take a look with me. Many, many times when people first sit on the machine, their legs will be kind of rotated outward a little bit, and it's almost easier to see if Josh goes ahead and straightens his legs some. I want you to see this. Now look right here. Can you see how from your angle that his knees are kind of pointed outward? And you can see more of the inside of his knee than the outside of his knee. What I really need for him to do and need for him to maintain is turning these so that his kneecap is right on top. You can see just about as much as the outside of his knee as the inside of his knee. And from where you're sitting looking straight down on it, that's going to be the easiest way to tell. So you're in a great position as you're doing the exercise, and monitor that the whole time. This is important to create the proper forces across your knee. Please don't assume that because your feet are pointed a certain way, come on up, Josh. Just because your feet are pointed straight up does not mean your knees are pointed straight up. It's the knees that matter. I don't care if your feet are even pointed in slightly. For some people, that might be what's required to get their knees in the right position. So pay attention to the knees, don't worry about the feet, and keep it that way the whole time. So there's your little safety tip, okay? Now, the next thing is, as you perform this exercise, perform it with a slow, controlled contraction here. Develop tension here and slowly use your quads to straighten your leg. Please don't just kick the thing. Many times people think that the whole goal is just to jam that leg device way out there. Yep, and this is not made for that. Your quads will go through a whole lot of extra strain. Your knees will go through a lot of extra force and stress by trying to kick. So keep it a slow, controlled motion. Feel free to go all the way to full extension if it's comfortable for you. And that's where you can really tighten the muscle here and then control it all the way back. And another final thing is pay attention to your posture and your neck position. As you're doing this and you're grabbing hold of the seat back here, think about not throwing your head forward, trying to keep it back with a pretty nice posture. Keep your chest up, shoulders back. This is a great time to practice that, and it's a great way to keep the forces from becoming extravagant or augmented on your neck, which happens a lot of times when people start straining and throwing their head forward. So watch all those things, set your resistance appropriately, and by the way, the setup of the entire leg developer unit was earlier on the DVD, so take a look at that if you don't remember. Krista is going to show you a hip extension exercise. This time, we're going to keep the knee pretty straight throughout the whole thing. So the entire motion is going to be right here at the hip. The muscles, mostly glutes, hamstrings, everybody that actually performs that motion from the back side right here. And she's going to start in the vertical, upright, erect position. Notice we got the freedom arm down about number 8 or number 9. And we're using the foot harness. This foot harness is perfect for all these variations of leg exercises, and we're attached to the toe D-ring. Now, choose a pretty light weight, especially as you're learning how to control things, because what occurs right here in the trunk, in your spine, is going to be critical, all right? Now watch as she performs the extension. She's bending forward just a little bit, which allows her a little more flexion to start with. In other words, flexion is a hip position. And then as she comes back, notice how she goes until she's fully contracted here, but the spine doesn't move. Can you see that? In fact, will you drop your hand just for 1 second, Krista, so they can see all that? In fact, you can even use this lat tower, use the freedom arm itself to control your body while you're standing on one leg. But look at this. Look how she's controlling that. That's really one of the important keys to this thing, right here. Show them what happens, Krista, when people start going crazy and start really throwing their pelvis into it and everything. There's what you want to avoid. And when does that typically happen? When she starts kicking it really hard. This is not a kick. This is a hip extension. So use control, be precise, work the muscles. Don't just throw your limbs and throw the machine around, okay? Really nice and controlled. Of course, we're going to use the other side as well. But the big thing, pay attention to your spine, tighten the abdominals, everything to control this trunk. Go to full extension, and one something you might do, do you ever do this, Krista, where you go all the way back there and just kind of hold it for even a fraction of a second? Just right there where you can really contract everything and then can really control it back down. Control that eccentric or that negative back to the starting position. Now you're going to be feeling it. This is a seated overhead press, and you've got a couple pretty neat options with your Revolution. The one in the manual shows the freedom arms all the way down and using the handle directly attached to them, pushing up at an angle. And that's a great version. But this one's kind of neat too, utilizing these pulleys that sometimes we don't take full advantage of down here on the ground. So take a look. Josh has scooted himself way out forward, so he's over these front pulleys. You can't do this resting back here. So this could almost be considered a little different variation in that he's got a lot more control required of him. When he was leaning back against the pad using the previous configuration I was talking about, it's a little easier for him. He doesn't have to control as much with his backrest. But anyway, go ahead and bring those pulleys, or sorry, handles up in position so the rope is coming across the front of the arm. And then just press right up overhead. And again, you can see that the direction he's pressing, that position relative to the pulleys, is incredibly important. If he was too far back, these ropes would be pulling at a totally different angle. Now he's got a couple options here too. He's doing a wide version of a press right now, but he might be able to kind of bring his arms a little bit more towards the front and kind of push forward. There you go. So he can push forward into the center a little bit. A couple great options. You're going to need to check your resistance, because each time you change the plane or direction you're pushing through, it's going to feel different. You're using different muscles, the joint's different. You're going to need to check for the resistance that's appropriate for each version of each exercise. Very important. So we're going to do a lateral raise exercise for the deltoids, and a lot of times they say specifically the medial deltoid, but it's going to be just about the bulk of the whole thing. Now, we're going to do it a little differently, because not only is it seated, but we're going to put the straps up around the forearms. And this really does help a lot. It changes the forces on your shoulder a lot, and it feels pretty good, but you just got to do a couple things. Get that handle out of the way so the webbing's up on top of your forearm, and also keep it clear up by your elbow. Don't let your arm start to straighten out and let this thing slide down, because then it changes everything. Keep bent enough that it stays up here, right up in the bend. Okay, that's very important. Pay attention to that the whole time. You're going to keep this bent. So now you're really just driving your elbows, not so much your hands, but your elbows out to the side. And this really is a great sensation. It's very, very different than having the weight in your hands and putting extra forces on your shoulder. So give this a try. You can see, once again, everything working here, middle deltoids, anterior deltoids, rear deltoids, and even rotator cuff muscles down inside. This is their primary job, is to make your shoulder function in this little manner right here. So take a look at that. Keep your posture up nice and straight. Josh could, if he wanted to, scoot up away from the back pad. That would change things a little bit. He could even lean forward a little bit if he wanted to, keeping his back in a nice, smooth, flat alignment. And that again changes the muscular contributions a little bit. In other words, it's changing who's participating just by changing the angle and his body's relationship to the resistance in the rope. So there's a couple great options, but the big thing is keep your posture, keep it nice and smooth, and keep that elbow bent so your resistance stays right up here. This is the shoulder shrug, primarily trapezius muscles, traps. These guys that peek up over your backside here by your shoulder blades. You can kind of see them from the front, but these are really on the backside of your body. And they're pretty vast, big fan-shaped muscles. You're mostly addressing the upper portions of those that do the lifting or elevation of the scapula or the shoulder blades. So, in order to resist an upward motion, we need resistance from below. So we're using the pulleys that are down there near the ground, and we're using the front ones. We've got the handles attached. And I might even have Josh to scoot back just a little bit so that the front of the pulley is just near the ball of his foot. Now, there's a couple things about these. You see people in the gym doing shrugs all the time. You see them doing things like circles. You know what I'm talking about? Where they do these big circles and things. Those motions like that may be fun, but they're not really resisted. You've got downward resistance, so only the upward motion is going to be challenged here. So you might as well just resign yourself to going straight up. And now here's the other thing you hear in the gym, kind of a myth. They say shrug towards your ears. But the thing is, your ears are actually a little bit forward of your shoulder. These muscles attach on the back of your head. So it would be much more direct if you would create the intention, the idea in your head of driving your shoulders towards the back of your head. Now in the process of doing that, sometimes you'll see people throw their chin forward. So they're like this. Yeah, they'll do that. Or they'll throw their chin up. We don't want either one of those. You want to keep a perfect posture here, and this is very important because as these muscles lift your shoulder blades, they're also pulling on your cervical spine. So the alignment or the position of your neck is really important with this exercise. So another thing that you'll see people do, they'll put on so much weight that they really can't go up towards the head, and they end up just kind of moving the shoulder blades in towards the base of the neck, kind of like right there. And that's, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. But to get all the way up and take advantage of all the development of this musculature all the way up to the head is what we're really looking for. So keep the weight appropriate to allow this full motion and keep all those little tips in mind, and you'll be surprised how much you can get out of this. Another final tip, pay close attention not only to the lifting, the concentric part, but pay close attention to what you could call the relaxation part. So on the way down, go really slow and really let this muscle relax, because sometimes this area is filled with tension. This is not a bad exercise just to help with the relaxation. Do not, however, when you go near the bottom, don't start slouching. This is not more stretch on this muscle. So keep your chest up and keep your posture. Just let those shoulder blades go down all the way. And I think you'll find some great options here if you take a look at all that stuff and create some great sensations and even relaxation through this strengthening exercise.